So Comic-Con has decided to put out sales charts numbers for comic books, and this, of course, has comic book pros celebrating that comic books are saved. Everything is better now. Let's take a look and see if that's real.
And if you don't like my politics, don't buy my book. Problem solved.
And that's been the story for the past couple of years. If you don't like my politics, don't buy my books. That's Kelly Sue DeConnick, Comic Book Pro. So here's what Comic-Con is putting out, which is funny considering they don't actually get sales numbers anymore because Diamond isn't a thing. But they're putting out some stuff here. And according to them, comic book industry has grown in total sales. It's had a big increase during the COOF year. And it's true if you consider young adult novels and manga as the growth for the comic book industry. DC Comics and Marvel Comics, very little to do with that. They really didn't have very much to do with these sales. In fact, I would say that those are probably still decreasing. Now, they have book channels right here. I believe book channels are bookstores like Barnes and Nobles and I think Scholastic, stuff like that. Those are doing good. Well, I mean, look at Barnes and Nobles, right? What do you see in there? Do you see Batman? No, Batman's in a little corner. Instead, you have two aisleways full of manga. But they include manga in this, which is funny. Like, why? Okay, so I get it. These are comics that are selling in North America, but they're not making the American industry a better place. They're making the industry better for retailers, which is great. But they're not making the industry better for comic book pros who have done their best to shoo off customers over the past 6 years. So here's what's going on. They say there's been this 6% increase in over sales in 2019 and I would put that to manga, and this is why. The site they increased to strong is due to strong sales of graphic novels online and in mass merchants and strong digital sales, which overcame big declines in comic and bookstore sales. Now, anytime you say strong sales of graphic novels, that makes me think, well, that's people buying manga. Okay, because you can do that online. You can buy them from Viz and all these other places. When we looked at the top 20 graphic novels for the past 2 months, it's dominated completely by manga. There's not one American comic on that list. So I'm already a little weary of this. The total comics and graphic novel sales to consumers in the U.S. and Canada were estimated to be $1.28 billion in 2020, which represents a 6% increase. You know what was selling out over 2020? Manga. So when they talk about graphic novels, that's what I believe they're talking about. No one's buying the other stuff. Come down here, they even mention it. They note that the beginning of the year was dominated by kids' graphic novels, which is stuff like Dogman, I believe. Kids' books, not superhero books. With manga doing similar later in the year, they also point out. They say there's signs of a manga drought. It's probably because you can't keep any of them in stock because everyone's buying them, which is exactly what the article talks about because there's a reprint problem. So because manga sales are through the roof, as they put it right here, printers can't keep up because of everything going on with the restrictions to the COOF, and just it's hard to get product right now. Things are kind of catching up to, last year, all the stocks run out. So that's going to be a little problem. But because someone that walked in looking for My Hero Academia Volume 1 couldn't get it, that doesn't mean they're going to walk out with Dan Slott's Spider-Man run. But see, these comic book pros, they seem to think that that's happening, which is incredibly laughable. We're going to go over some of that stuff in a second, but I just find it funny, like, that Comic-Con does this stuff. They've been doing this since, I want to say, like 2 years ago. They've been sneaking in manga numbers for their graphic novels. That's why that bar right there is so much bigger and dwarfs comic books and digital comics. That's because they're including manga. You're including manga in the sales, but you think that makes the comic book industry healthy? That's why they do this, to hide it. It's hilarious. And then you've got dumb comic book pros running around on Twitter acting like the industry is saved, which I find absolutely hilarious. Here's one right here, Tim Seeley. He's a comic book writer, professional writer. And I'll give him some credit for not using blockchains, okay? Everybody in the comic book industry, for the most part, uses blockchains, and they'll block people that aren't doing anything to them, and it creates a big problem. So he says, just some factual things. Manga is comics. It literally means comics. Comic books are just books full of comics. Also, comics as a form was invented in America. You can learn all this and more in my comics class, which is full of other factual things. And that's true. Manga does mean it. But it's used as a distinction over here, and this is why they keep the Japanese word, to separate it from the American medium. If you say manga, I know what I'm getting. I'm getting a Japanese comic book, not an American comic book. I'm not walking away with Teen Titans. Here's Tim again with an even hotter take, which I find funny. He starts arguing with just some guy. So Comic-Con puts this on Twitter 21 hours ago, and this guy comes in and is laughing. Comics are dying. Oh, no, they're not. And then just some guy comes and schools him. The charts show the American comic book industry literally published a third fewer books in 2020 compared to 2019. So, yes, American comics are stagnant. Manga and kid books reign supreme. Tim Seeley says, stagnant, American published had similar sales as the previous year with less new books because of the pandemic that shut down stores. Doing all right. Just some guy says, retailers ordered the same number of books, but publishers printed 30% less, ending in same earnings as 2019. Hence the word stagnant controversy. Conversely, manga was literally printed, ordered, and bought more than before. One of those is growth. The other is the comic book industry. Then genius take here from Tim. Manga is part of the comic book industry. It's comics. It's comics. As are digital comics and comics for kids. If it makes you happy to think American comics are different than other comics and are in bad shape, carry on, I guess. So this is what's funny about the comic book pros when it comes to this. And I've used this example before. I'm going to use it again. If you are in the American car industry, this is a good example because it actually happened. And Toyota comes in and starts dominating your industry. This is not good for GM, Chrysler, or Ford. Okay. And there was a long time, like, people were calling these cars junk. And, this is one of the reasons that you had the cheaper, better made Japanese product. And they had to adapt and change to compete with them. Now, this is something that Marvel and DC Comics isn't doing to compete with the Japanese superior model coming in like the car companies did. No, they just say the car companies are making them better. Tim, I challenge you to go to Japan and find work. No one's going to hire you. They already have lots of talent in Japan. That's arguably much more talented than the people over in America. So it's just funny to me, like, Viz and all these other companies that are taking over because they're putting out all this manga, that's not going to help Marvel and DC Comics. Like, the data shows nobody's going, oh, okay, well, I just finished reading Full Metal Alchemist. I'm going to go check out Batman. No, they're going to go check out a different book. A book that's much easier to follow, is self-contained, and 9 times out of 10 has better artwork and story than anything they're going to find in that dinky little Barnes & Noble's shelf where they've just kind of stuck American comics. If American comics are doing so good, why don't I see a whole aisle of American comics when I walk into Barnes & Noble's? The writing's on the wall. The writing's on the wall, Tim. Sorry, man. You're wrong here. But keep thinking. It's funny. It's funny to watch. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Let me know what you guys think. I'd like to hear your comments. Also, if you would, please like, subscribe, share the video. Make sure you're still subscribed. Hit that notification bell. And as always, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace. Also, if you want to help support the channel, check out my Teespring store. There's a link in the description. You can find some merchandise in there that you might want to check out. Also, take a moment. Make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. There's something going on right now, and they've been unsubscribing people. So just take a second and double check on that and subscribe if you're new.